So my first question for you is, after like looking at your website, I see that you are doing it all. You're like a triple threat, which is so impressive. So I saw that you have experience in writing, editing, and publishing. So I was just wondering if that's something that you knew you wanted to do, like all three from the get-go, or was it something that you sort of like, did you start with one and then just discover your interest for the other two as you went on?
I definitely didn't know, so I don't think I don't think I really had clear career direction until I graduated from college. And at that point I felt like I always wrote. And even when I was in Rye, like I kind of remembered that I had written a short story that got included in the annual bulletin, but I had never had aspirations to be a writer. And that may have been in part because, and I don't know, I guess this isn't only to the high school audience, to our high school audience, but I would characterize our high school as like not being very arts oriented at all when I was there. So I didn't have a sense of writer as a viable career, but not to blame the high school. That was just the atmosphere I felt I was in, which was that to pursue writing was not practical, and it would be more practical to pursue something like law. So I wrote on the side, but didn't really want to make it my career. I got to college and was very indecisive about what I liked in the college experience. And my junior year of college, I was an English major, and we took a class that had us reading contemporary novels. And that was the first time, I think, since I had come to college that I was doing serious personal, it felt like personal reading in not reading the classics anymore. And that kind of, when I finally graduated, led me to look for a job in book publishing, because like I had this recognition that I really liked reading books, and I could pursue a career doing that. And I also just didn't really understand enough about adult careers. I mean, yeah, I feel like you're even more probably like, I don't know, maybe people are more sophisticated now, but I didn't understand company terminology that much. And so if there was a company and they were recruiting people with editorial skills, I didn't understand that as much as books. I didn't understand that you could have certain skills and not work on books. And so I always kept on the writing as a hobby, but I actually only really thought about pursuing it. I worked in book publishing, and then I had, which I don't think is very uncommon for writers, kind of a setbacks in my personal life, and that drove me to write more. And at that point, like I was in my mid-20s, and I got a lot of encouragement from a teacher about my writing, which I had not really gotten in the past for my writing. But once I had that encouragement from the teacher, and you can interrupt, by the way.
Oh, no, don't worry, keep going. I'm really interested in this.
Okay, because also at that point I was in New York City, and the environment here is very, very arts oriented. It's a really different environment than other places. So at that point, being in book publishing, being surrounded by people achieving and making money off these artistic dreams, which I realized that I could pursue writing in a more serious way, and it was totally doable. I mean, I think that was another thing about, I didn't know any professional writers growing up.
Mhm.
Like there were none in my family. And in high school, none of my parents did that, or none of my friends' parents did that. So the circle was very small. And so I think that was also playing a role. But once I got to the city and worked in publishing, I knew tons of people who wrote, and it was like it seemed much less difficult to me. And that's why so I've ended up doing all three because of this. And within publishing, I did do editing. I think editing I always had a real affinity for, and probably was more of a strength for me than the other two, because editing was something I never had to be judged on. So I only learned about editing through these processes with doing it with authors, and they were the ones who were grateful, and it was always very positive. And I think that's why I kind of, as opposed to when you like are trying to get published or trying to get a job, I never experienced series of rejections with editing, and I never also had it in my mind necessarily. It was more like I wanted to work with books, and then
Mhm.
and then I started editing. So because I just brought, that was because you brought editing is the task that I do within publishing. Publishing is the field I'm in. Editing is the work I do within publishing, and writing. Even though I've gotten published, I still feel writing is something I do for myself. So it
Mhm.
still has remained a little like I try anyway to have it remain more to the
I
side.
totally get that. Yeah, that is very interesting that like you found yourself gaining confidence in your writing when you were sort of surrounded by more writers and more like people. Basically your confidence in your skills, if I heard this correctly, was sort of dependent on your environment, right?
I think so. Yes. Yeah. And that's what it appeared to me
Mhm.
for
So
sure.
if so building on that, this idea that like if there were more resources that you had just when you were younger, let's say you were in high school, like what would you have wished they were, and what resources did you have that inspired you to continue on your interest in college?
Oh, that's well, I felt like it's really difficult to say because then you look back and go, oh, it was almost a strength that there were no resources because I feel like like when I look back to reading, this is a very adult perspective too. I was an only child, and I was in a household where one of my parents was a really deep reader, and the other parent was pretty motivated about getting me books. And I think that was the biggest thing that really could not have been solved so much by the resources of the school system or the outside world. Like I really felt that was a very big influence on me was that setup. I was thinking about this lately too. But if you're talking about when I got to school, it was nurtured in certain ways. Teachers did would see that I read a lot and tried to encourage me and stuff. So I think the encouragement and notice from teachers was helpful, and I felt like that is something that can really make a difference for a kid that maybe teachers forget. I don't know. I'm not a teacher. So I think it's probably very hard. They're probably dealing with a lot of very needy children who want attention all the time. But I know it meant a lot to me, especially after a certain age, just to be noticed. I would say after the age of 10, I was very concerned with being noticed.
Mhm.
And if someone had noticed that I enjoyed reading and maybe complimented me about it, that would have helped. But I have to say also my attention was really on my peers, and it was really on getting good grades and getting into a good college. And ironically, I think the reading was really my strength into getting into good colleges and stuff. Like the thing I had done for myself was more of the strength. And I thought the thing that would be the strength would be pursuing all these other things that weren't my strength. Anyway, so what other resources? So you see why I'm mixed. I could say a library or teachers who cared about me. I could say more like I remember we did field trips to Broadway, but we never really did like a field trip to like a bookstore in the city or like an author event in the city. Those things might have been interesting. And even when we did have an author come to Rye, it was a young adult author, which was good, but that is limited and different than having an author who's an adult. That's someone who's almost also speaking to you as a teen. They're almost on your level.
Mhm.
Whereas I think it's not so much like presenting it to you on the level of like, and this could be a possible career for you. But I think maybe having that experience of having authors come into the schools who aren't necessarily there to involve you as a child or a teen, but to engage you as a potential writer would be something that would be very helpful because I think that would have made it a reality. Okay, that's it. Yeah, but I would say it is very critical for anyone with artistic pursuits to face huge obstacles. They have to kind of it is artistic pursuits are like it's like a paradoxical thing. Like you don't want them to come from the same place as the careerism and professionalism of other things. So
Mhm.
that's what I would say. Okay.
Thank you. Yes. So you obviously work so you've had a job in like publishing, like entryway before you decided like editing was your thing. So my question for you, since you have, and then you have experience being published as well. So having been in this different positions of the publishing process, could you maybe walk me through it, and tell me if like your perspective changed depending on like which position you were in, and as you
Like
took the different roles?
the you mean like my position as an editor versus my position as an author, or the process of getting published?
So like the
Which
just like the publishing process and like your position as an author and as an editor, if that makes sense.
Okay, well, I'll try, but you can intervene as I would say my position as an author, I never wanted to be an author until I was really like my back was against the wall and I was kind of flailing, like being sad about my personal life. So I signed up for a writing class to have something to do. And I did it and I got a lot of good feedback. And I got feedback from someone who was really went out of their way to give feedback. I don't know if people like I had it in me to pursue writing without someone who would have like gone to the extent that this person did to get me to pursue it. So it was really like as an author, it was just coming out of a like when I first started writing, it was coming out of a very like genuine, uh easy place, very uncompetitive place, not usually wanting to be the best, not really caring. But at a certain point, I did, as I was getting more published by magazines and everything, I started drawing upon my experience in book publishing to think, I think I could write a young adult novel. And I had thought this before, and I had written a young adult novel, and then I just put it away and never looked back because my experience in book publishing was like editors and agents have a lot of stability and authors don't. And they often seem very uneasy, neurotic, and like, you know, when you're an editor or an agent, a lot of your role is calming authors because they deal with a lot of instability and uncertainty and rejection in their careers. And I did not want to find myself. I was like, I'm very happy to be the calmer. And as an editor and an agent, I felt very comfortable in that role because you're cheerleading someone else's writing, and that was really easy. You know, I really love writing, but like to cheerlead my own writing felt like if I mean, this is kind of like dark, you know, but like if you really don't believe you're pretty and everyone's telling you are, but you're looking in the mirror and maybe you see it sometimes, but you're not really sure. That was almost like my experience with writing. It was just very uncertain. Nevertheless, once I realized I was selling young adult books as an agent and I really thought I could do it, you know, I said, and it was almost like I needed to see other people do it and feel like I was like, I'm kind of like them and they did it. Why can't I do it? So then I wrote and sold this novel. So that was a little less innocent, right, than my other writing up to this point. It wasn't just like, oh, I'm doing this for the love. I was kind of like, let me see what I can do. And I wrote that novel and I did get it sold, and it was hard because I felt like I was approaching people I knew in the industry about the novel. It was just very, like, I felt very naked, you know, and like kind of concerned because I was getting burnt out of book publishing. And in a way, I was like, if I don't like book publishing and this novel doesn't succeed, what am I going to do? You know, I was like, I don't know. But I did get to sell that novel. And at that point, right, then I was more fully at that point, I left my job in book publishing and was more fully a freelance writer editor. And I would say the transition was very, very difficult. You know, all the things I said about earlier about the neurotic authors, the financial instability that set in because I was freelance, the uncertainty about the quality of my own writing. Whereas if I'm an editor editing someone, I have total faith in their writing. You never, and I also have total faith in my editing, but I had a lot less, you know, faith in my writing. I think that's pretty normal. I wouldn't say, you know, but it just didn't, I was never like super confident about that aspect. So that takes us to like, so I was working on the novel for a while. So I don't know, should I go into publication?
Yes.
Okay.
Um, it at your leisure though, because I'm also very interested in editing. Because that's what a lot of what I do with the guys.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. So I can break it down. Like the thing I guess where I was, do you want to hear about editing my own work or editing other people's work?
Maybe a little bit of both. Just the idea of maybe like, for the viewers, people who don't really have access to like an editor, how do you edit your own, and be able to put on those editing lenses
It's
on?
very difficult. But I would say, I try to take a lot of space with my own work and, like literally like put it down. It's really difficult though. It's way more difficult than I'm confused because I am so into editing other people's work, but editing my own work and getting those super neutral eyes has been really, really hard for me. I think often I don't see things that are really obvious to me. And if like with my own book, I picked it up and looked at it for the first time in like 7 years, and I saw immediately like what the problem was with the first 10 pages, and I was too in the thick of things, and like and I think sometimes especially passages that seem slow to readers are when you're the author, maybe you have more of an affinity for these little slow thoughts, and you're like, I don't know, you're kind of like, but life is slow and it's okay, but it's not really okay all the time.
Mhm.
And for some reason I feel like that is one area, or like the passive protagonist is a problem a lot of my clients have, and I have had that problem too, like, and it's gotten to the point with me where I'm writing where I force myself to just make the protagonist do things. Like I used to say, like, oh, it wouldn't be in her character to do this thing. It would be more likely for a friend or another person to do this thing. But now I just have her do it because I just know how like badly it looks on the page sometimes to have someone just not doing things for pages and pages. So I would say it's very hard to edit yourself, and good luck for everyone. I really only, it's my ego is way too involved. I do think finding an editor you trust and click with is like really priceless. Like,
Mhm.
and while I do think to become a stronger writer, it's probably pretty important that you don't have that many voices coming in at you, because everyone has a different opinion, and it, or like not, and that can be really just stressful and weird, especially if you have tendencies already where you take on, which I think a lot of writers do, they already take on a lot of voices. And then they have these voices coming in and they may just switch their opinion, based on the last person to talk to them. But I have worked with some editors who are really deep and very insightful, and their edits feel like they really belong in the fabric of what you're writing already. So I would definitely like trust those edits. Editing other people's work is something I feel very confident in. I like it because I really come from a perspective of clearness. I don't judge. I think that's a big divider between editors, although I try not to like, but I find a lot of editors are people who are editing are a little harsher than I am, like, and I'm harsh in life in many, many ways, but I don't feel when you're editing, your job is to say whether something is good or bad. It's kind of like, is it there or is it not there, and then like, how can we get it there? Um, and, but that's not something I have to think about. It comes very naturally. I would say people who maybe should not edit are people who get kind of offended and upset at writing. Like I've been around people who are like, oh, it's so annoying. But I will say, as a writer, if I'm in a competitive mode, I can get kind of mean about other people's writing. Like that's what, I can get in that mode. But as an editor, you should like never be in that mode.
That
um,
makes a lot of sense. I would hope that they aren't. So another question I have is mainly publication, just for people who don't know, like myself. What does a publication process normally look like with a novel? Because I know you have experience being on either side of it. So what, maybe like the timeline or just exactly what goes into it, just so our viewers have a sense.
So you usually, if you're writing fiction, you usually, and you're a first time author, you will have the completed manuscript, and then you'll get an agent. You go through a process that's like looking for a job, where you write the agent and you ask them, to consider your work, and then they'll consider your work and they'll like accept or reject it. But the process is, for especially for first time authors, is usually like pretty laborious, because it's all you don't know these people, and I think people really struggle sometimes with that part of the process. Then ideally you get an agent, but like most people don't get agents. When I was in an agency, I would say we rejected 98% of the queries from the slush pile, which is how an author would start, which is coming in anonymously. But I would also say knowing someone isn't always helpful, especially for fiction. Like, it can get you read, but it won't really get you taken on. Like, I don't know, it's probably a little bit easier though. Nonfiction, you usually do a book proposal. You usually don't have to write the whole manuscript out. You usually just like write an outline of what you think the manuscript is going to look like. So once you get an agent, the agent then sort of repeats the process, but to the publishers, and they act as your intermediary or middleman, and they will go to the publishers and submit your manuscript. And usually you'll have done editing work with your agent to get it ready to be seen by the editors. And what I work in now is getting people edited. I edit their work so they can be seen by the agents, so there's a lot of like, and that's not a necessary step, but that's definitely a direction that the industry has gone in, where like editors are ending up doing less and less work, and now agents are not less work, but their work has become a different kind of work, more like project management work, where they don't edit as much, and agents now are doing less of the editing and will hire an editor. So that's something that's sort of interesting. So anyway, you've done like, and that whole process of writing and editing your work can take people years. I mean, it always takes longer than people think, and book publishing moves the slowest of like any industry. Maybe there's some things with like cities and selling tracts of city land that move slower, like 100-year leases. Like, they're always saying stuff like, yeah, I would say like those are very glacial pace. But book publishing is pretty glacial pace for media. Like, it's not like magazines. Films, I think, are similarly slow, but it's slow in a chaotic way. Book publishing is a very like stately, measured industry. So say you get this book deal. Now the agent has submitted your work to publishing houses. Then you get the book deal. Then you could probably expect to see your book like on the shelves. I mean, maybe a year, but that would be probably quick, but a year and a half after you sign the contract. But it could be longer than that. Like, and especially because a nonfiction, you do have to do the research and stuff sometimes. So that can, and you haven't written the book, so that can take even longer. But I'd say a year and a half to 2 years after you sign the contract would be the typical time to see the book published. Okay, so yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, because I know a lot of people don't really realize the amount of time that it takes. Like you were saying, it takes a while. And this idea that like writing and editing is one thing, but once it's done, it's not quite done.
Right. Yes.
That timeline
is definitely not done. Yes. And a lot of people are working a lot in that 1.5 year, like you are editing and doing edits, and that can be, I mean, well, I was going to say it's easier than writing the first draft, but I don't even know if that's true. So I'll just leave it at
that.
Yeah.
So my last question for you is just, what advice would you give to any young writers hoping to improve their craft and hopefully be published later down the line?
Oh, that's such a great question. Well, I think the thing I said about earlier about finding someone you trust to go over your work could be helpful. If there's someone, like, I think working with a great editor can bring your work up to another level. and that if you're young, that doesn't mean someone you necessarily hire, but could just be a friend that you feel really solid about trading drafts with and stuff. And um the other thing is, this is kind of more like woo woo, but like I would say like continuously writing and kind of, I don't know, because like I was a very career oriented person. Like my idea was like I got to get a paycheck, like it was kind of practical for me. And I would often like just put writing in the little corners of my life, like if I was between jobs, I would write, but then but I would say it's probably good to continuously do it and not take time away. I don't know, maybe like running a little like that or something, the way some people are these fanatics about running, but I do feel you lose something when you stop. I know that's a personal thing. Craft, it's funny because I give a lot of craft advice, but I'm also not really right brained like that. Like it's really hard for me to get advice, and like sometimes I'm like, am I really implementing this? Because when you write, you can't like be like, now I am making, I know she's supposed to pick up, do gestures in between dialogue. So let me write a gesture in between a dialogue. But I would say some people get a lot out of like the craft books that are about structure, act one, act two, act three. I mean, I know people who have written books like this that will tell them how to structure, and screenplay books like the Save the Cat book that's about screenplay books. Sometimes I think some authors could benefit. Like screenplay people write in a very formulaic way, and so do romance authors. Like they have these set structures, and I do think that can free some people a little bit to have those structures. And if you're starting out, why not experiment with those structures? I think they can sometimes bring a lot out of you. I don't know, what do you think? It's a very particular question, like I guess be open. And also, like, I would say as a professional, I really feel like there's some books that are very inspired, and I think you kind of know when you have that feeling. And I would say chase that feeling. Like if you really like writing something and you're really passionate about it, I would chase that feeling, because I think sometimes that can really like sizzle in a certain way.
Mhm.
um I mean, and also because my background is working with people who are like a few books along. So that's why I maybe know, like, you don't always have that feeling. Like it does become a job sometimes, anyway. And change it up. Okay, that's my final thing. I know now, like,
Oh,
I
no,
think
right?
as a writer, I've really benefited a little from like I took a poetry writing class once, even though I'm not really into poetry, or it's not something I pursue, but like I find sometimes doing things that are unexpected and even to yourself can be really fun. Like to keep that, I guess the theme is to keep that inspiration and good feeling going along with your work, because especially like when you're young, you have a lot of energy. You don't realize that, you can get really, really like jaded in a certain way when you're older, and you don't find that fun as much. But I think it's important to keep finding that fun as a I would also say as a young person, sorry, I know,
No, don't
but
worry.
like
This is great. This is great.
um I would like, some people are very naturally aggressive about approaching, and aggressive may even be a harsh word, but they're very confident about approaching writers they like, or are going for things they like. But I was not one of those people. And I kind of wish I had been a little bit like, but again, sometimes I thought it was a strength that I wasn't like that. Like I was very much like read the book, but I didn't feel the need to like network about it afterwards. And not,
Got it.
I mean, I don't even know who wants to go to these book talks. They're not that, like I didn't have that. But sometimes I kind of, there were like I remember when I was in high school, I wrote an author I really liked. I wrote like two authors I really liked, and I think that was kind of cool. They both wrote back, and those things that will kind of encourage you in a certain way, like you're in this dialogue. And I think older writers actually are really, I think, like, I look back now and I realize how that must have been very cool for them to know a young audience, especially because young people are a little more authentic in their responses. So you feel like, oh, wow, it's kind of cool. So I guess I would say, like, as I recounted this whole process, that person who mentored me was so important to me. And I do think there are older people who want to mentor you and want to encourage you. However, I also think it'd be kind of crazy to be like, I'm looking to be mentored, but just know that, you know, feel free to express your love for these things, and nurture your love of reading and writing, and don't be afraid of telling authors you like, or being engaged, as long as it comes from like a pure and happy place. I mean, and who am I to judge people does not, come from that place. Like, those are the more people who already feel, I think there are people who already feel confident doing that stuff. So it's not directed towards them.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I completely agree. This idea of like, if you enjoy something, because not only will you feel good about it, they'll feel good about it too. And I think that's
Right. I think that's actually, like, a lot of times when I do an interview like this, I'm like, I should really listen to this person. Like, she knows, but it is really helpful. I think sometimes it kind of loosens up something inside of you. And that's probably why I like being an editor too. It's like I can give what I want to get sometimes as a writer, but I can give it to other people. And that's almost as good, just, yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So I think that is all. Actually, really quickly, I wanted to ask, like, what advice do you recommend for people who are more interested in like the businessy side of like the technical stuff side of becoming a writer? So this idea of like, how do you find an agent, or like, is there a website that you recommend they visit for those resources?
Um, the publisher's marketplace is where they keep track of deals. So you have to have a login, but I don't think you have to have a login to look at the deals. So then you can find a list of agents, and you can find the ones who are active because the deals are chronological. So you can know that the people you're writing are active and out there. I also think I mean, it's very, maybe a little antiquated, but the acknowledgement sections of books you like are a really good way to make sure, like, target people who will probably like the same stuff you like.
Mhm.
And then on Twitter, I know there's this thing, manuscript wish list, which is like a hashtag. It's like MSWL, that some agents will say the kind of work they want. And I know
Oh,
people have
wow.
gotten agents from that. Yeah, I think that's like kind of a good direct way. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Because we're hoping to include like sort of links to stuff on our page as well, on our resource page. So that's a great place for us to start as well. So thank you.